So I will just start with some few words about ground rules about the conference. So by default, all participants are muted, video off. And we're going to record this lunch and learn, and we're going to post it later on. So the presentation will take about 30 minutes, and after that we'll take questions for 15 minutes, maybe more if you have lots of questions. And you will be able to write down your question in the chat. So Chiara will manage the chat and the questions. I will read the question and Camille will answer. So thank you, Camille, for doing this presentation with us. And we hope you're going to enjoy this lunch and learn. So Camille Cosson is a business developer manager in Emerson. She's an expert in geological modeling and have worked on various field studies in Europe, Africa, South America, and Asia. She has knowledges in petroleum geoscience, seismic interpretation, reservoir modeling, and provides expertise in integrated reservoir studies. And she has a master degree in petroleum geoscience with INSG in Nancy. So Camille, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Aurélie. Do you hear me well? Yes, I hope. Okay, well, thank you very much, all, for joining this webinar. I'm really excited to, to be here with you. And today I would like to present to you an integrated workflow that helps better understand a reservoir and mitigate risk. So let's take a step forward and let's look at the reservoir life cycle. So during the field life cycle, an ASEM team is going to calculate, to forecast some key indicators that are used to take decisions regarding how to appraise, develop, and produce a field, right? And this indicator can be the STOIIP, can be some production forecast, but they are the results, they are the outcomes of a cooperation across geoscientists and reservoir engineers. So there is a cross-discipline collaboration that is needed all along the field life in order to be able to manage the most sustainably, the most safely a field. But what we see, what people have noticed is that across disciplines, between the disciplines, we see the appearance of what we call silos, like a lack of communication across the different disciplines. And that happens for various reasons. Can be simply because those disciplines are different with different methods, different languages. Data don't arrive at the same times, so you have different time cycle. So there are a lot of reasons, and the consequence of that is that it creates some redundancies between the different collaborators. There are some inconsistencies between the disciplines, and the cooperation may not be working as well as it could, and it won't deliver the best output it could or not fast enough. And that's a problem because it impacts reservoir management decisions, of course, and consequently time to first oil, CapEx, and OpEx. So what I'm going to present today, the solution I would like to present to you, it's a solution that helps create better integration across those disciplines. But it doesn't solve all the problems, of course, but it helps preserving consistency across domains, and it results in better understanding of the reservoir. So in this presentation, there are going to be two parts. First, I would like to present to you what is this solution, what is this approach, and I will use a case study to show how we apply it. Okay. So this approach, this collaborative, this integrated approach, that's what we call big loop. So in a big loop, with the big loop approach, all the tasks that are done by geoscientists and engineers are going to be automated, and they're going to be integrated within a global workflow, a global sequence that can be fully played, that can be run fully automatically and deliver output. So you have this sequence that you build, and if it will integrate some data, it will transform those data through different processes that will generate outcomes that you use to take decisions, okay? And you can replay this workflow as many times as you want, and you can also change the inputs and propagate those modifications and update the results. So that's the first thing, the automation of those GNG and reservoir engineering workflows all together. So you are going, when you do that, you are going to be able to capture and preserve the consistency that you have created. You generate a consistency across all those different domains. And then we are going to combine that with assisted history match. So within the assisted history match, its role is to learn how the different parameters, the geologic and dynamic parameters, are going to impact a response, an indicator that we use to take decisions. And it's going to assimilate data from the field, such as production, pressure data, PLT, RFT, well test, but it can also be 4D seismic network constraints. And it's going to, by assimilating those data, it's going to calibrate all the different steps of the workflow in order to deliver models that are all consistent between together and that are all calibrated to all data available, both data from subsurface and data from the field. So that's the first thing. How do we do that? So what is really key is being able to create this automation. So we need for that a super application, let's say, what we call a workflow orchestrator. The workflow orchestrator, its role is to run other application, the disciplines specialist, the application that a specialist will use. So for example, here you have represented the application that would use a geomodeler and then a reservoir engineer. So this workflow orchestrator, it will run one after another those different applications, and it's going to send the inputs from one application to another. So it's going to manage the sequence. And then within which application, we need to have, each scientist must have automated all the tasks that he has to do. So here it's an example where we use those two only components, geomodeling and reservoir engineering, and that's also what we have done in the case study that I will present you just before. But what is really interesting is that this workflow, it's not only geomodeling and reservoir engineering. It has to integrate all the components that will matter for you and that will help you understand the reservoir. So it can be hidden, you can add more components. For example, on the, let's say, downstream side, if you want to integrate the impact of the network, the well network constraints on your production, you could integrate a component, a production modeling component. And that's something that we do. We have many projects with when we integrate another component here in order to have more constrained production profiles. On the other end, on the upstream side, that's also something you could do. If you want to integrate some petrophysical processes, you can integrate them to the sequence. You can integrate actually any third-party application, any bespoke application, any scripts. It has, they have to fill some condition, of course. They need to be automatizable, and they need to be able to run fully in batch and from a command line. If it respects those conditions, we can integrate them within the sequence. So that's really a workflow that is fit for purpose, that is here to be customized in function of your needs and that can be open and scaled as needed. So yes, so that's really the thing, being able to integrate domain together and automatize the workflow. So then when we're going to run this workflow, run this sequence, so I'm coming back to this figure that you have here, we're going to not generate one unique model. We're going to integrate also the fact that there are uncertainties in the subsurface. So across all domains, we know that there are uncertainties, and it's the work of each expert, each geoscientist, each engineers to assess what are those uncertainties, quantify those uncertainties. And then with Big Loop, with this approach, we can sample through all those uncertainty distributions and generate not one, but what we call an ensemble of models. So we are going to generate, so for that we use high performance computers or clusters. We're going to generate hundreds or even thousands of models. And so we don't have anymore one model, that represents what is the reservoir. We have the ensemble, and it's this ensemble that captures both at the same time our understanding of the reservoir and also what it could be, the variability, the uncertainty associated with this reservoir. What is interesting with this ensemble is that from this, you can extract probability density function. So you can have an estimate, you can have a standard deviation. So you can do probabilistic, you can do robust quantification of the variation. And if you use those density function with parameters of importance, such as how much oil you would produce at a specific date, you can quantify the risk. So that's the second thing with Big Loop. So to summarize, we have some data, okay, and those data through all the processes, through the geophysical processes, the petrophysical, the modeling, and the dynamic simulation processes are going to be transformed into a reservoir response that we have modeled, okay, and this reservoir response can be changed, modified in function of parameters that are uncertain. So if when we sample through all those uncertainty spaces, we have a very large range of possible response. But then usually when a field is producing, you have a very nice data coming from the field, you have those production data. And with the assisted history match algorithms, so the assisted history match algorithm learns how those parameters impact this response, and you have and when you are at this stage, we are in what we call the prior stage. We are looking at prior uncertainty and how they impact the response. Then once we have those historical production data, we're going to refine, we're going to enter in a phase when we're going to modify our distribution of uncertainties in order to ensure that all those runs that are generated by sampling through those uncertainty distribution are going to match what the measure from the field given a certain tolerance that is specified. And this stage, this step, that's what we call the posterior. And here, when we look at the posterior, when we look at this posterior ensemble, and we look at how the geologic and dynamic, all the parameters that could be modified have been shaded by being calibrated with production data, we learn a lot about the reservoir. And that's what I would like to show you with the case study. So in the case study, I will briefly review with you those 3 steps that we need to implement in order to design, implement, and apply this Big Loop approach. So the first thing is, of course, the automation. How do you automate a geomodeling workflow, for example, and how you automate GNG geomodeling and then reservoir engineering. So how do you create this project? That's the first step. In the second step, we're going to use the automated workflow to generate those different ensembles I just discussed. So the prior ensemble first, then a posterior, and then how we can understand this ensemble of models. How do you understand what? How do you analyze hundreds of models all together at the same time? So we will go through some key tools that we have to analyze those ensembles and extract some very valuable insights about the reservoir. And then finally, once we have analyzed enough, when we have validated the consistency, the reliability of those ensembles, we can use them to do predictions, to assess different scenarios, compare them, and then identify most optimized scenario to develop the field. So in this case study, I'm going to use, so if you look at the icons that you have on the bottom left here, those 2 icons, so I'm going to use a field, which it's a synthetic case, okay, but it's very realistic. And the idea is that we are in a normal faulted environment with you have a half carbon structure, you have some wells here. And the question that the HACCP team is asking themselves is, do we need to drill new wells, a new producer and a new injector, or do we just don't do any further development in this field? So to answer these questions, they want to do a risk analysis of and assess the 2 scenarios. For that, they have built, again, this Big Loop workflow that includes a geomodeling component. and then a flow simulation component. So we have two geoscientists that are going to collaborate with each other, first a geomodeler and then a reservoir engineers. And then both together, they can manage the overall project and they will access the workflow orchestrator to control and analyze the results together. So if we look at what happened on the geomodeling side, so of course the geomodeler, it will use the application he is used to work with. So in this case, I'm using RMS. And here in this application, so you see the 3D viewer, you have the workflow pane on the left. What has been done? Well, the geomodeler has automated all the steps to go from velocity modeling, time depth conversion of inputs, creation of a structural model in the depth domain, and then gridding, doing fishes modeling. So in this case, you see that we have used an object-based method to model fishes and channels and crevasse in a fluid plane. Then property modeling. So we have here the porosity model, we have a permeability model, water saturation that have been calculated there. And then a flow simulation grid is generated and all the properties needed for flow simulation are generated and output into a format compatible with the flow simulators. So all those steps here, they are done, they have been automated, and that's why especially we use RMS for Big Loop, because this application, it's has been designed for being able for automating all the steps of geomodeling workflow. So really from structural modeling to exporting flow simulation input, you can automate all of that. And what I am highlighting here on the bottom left corner, actually that's the play button. So here I'm just showing you a picture, but if I would click play, all this sequence would be rerun a new time. So the idea is that I have created the workflow, and now this workflow is going to be run a certain number of times with different parameters that are going to be controlled, sent from the workflow orchestrator in order to screen through the uncertainties. And each time I have a new model generated, it's going to be sent to the flow simulators. In the flow simulators, so here I'm showing the application that is used by the reservoir engineer. It's, in this case, it's Tempest-More, the flow simulator that we have at Emerson. So everything is automated traditionally through a DEG file. So that's what you have here, the DEG file that have been generated by the reservoir engineers, but you have we have ensured with some includes that all the parameters coming from the geomodels are always used in this simulation deck. So every time the geomodel is modified, it will also change the parameter of the simulation. It will be integrated in there and it will impact the flow simulation results. So here, that's this interface that you see, it's Tempest, so it's the application for the reservoir engineer, but it's actually also the application that we use as workflow orchestrator. So what I'm showing you here now, it's I said that we need to specify uncertainties. We want to screen through all the uncertainties. So what I'm showing you here, it's a big table where we have summarized all the uncertainty distribution of all the parameters that will impact oil production total in this case. So, and they are both, so here I think we are around 50 parameters, and I can show you some of them. So for example, those one going from N1 to F9 are parameters that are going to impact the structure of your reservoir. There are parameters that are that impact, in fact, the location of the fault in space. So we have defined an uncertainty envelope for all the faults, and those parameters will control how much the faults are going to move within those envelope. We also have uncertainty envelope like that for horizon, so for the top and the base of the reservoir. We also are uncertainty parameters on all the parameters that have been used to generate the phases model. There are always a lot of uncertainties related to the location of the channels. So what's the proportion of channels versus fluid plane? What are the dimension of those channels? What are their sinuosity, width, thickness? All of that are parameters that are used as modifiers, as uncertainty within this workflow. And of course, also we have uncertainties on parameters that are used in the flow simulation, such as here the full transmissibility multipliers And also, in this case, we use a J function to model the water situation. So another example is that we use oil-water contact, the parameters of the J function, irreducible water saturation, maximal water saturation, the empirical parameters are also variables that we're going to use. And then, so we do this scoping phase. So we're going to screen through all the uncertainty space, and that will this is the outcome that we will have. So here we are looking at the total oil production for the field through time, given all those uncertainties. So we are looking at the prior uncertainty space. And this is something that we can quantify. Okay, so here I have displayed some bar, and you know that it indicates the P90, P50, P10 for the oil water contact, and you see that you have an uneven distribution of the run. So you have, so those statistics are really the true statistics. You also see that we have historical production data that are represented by those red squares. So we have also used the machine learning, I mean the assisted history match solution to calculate a posterior. And this is what you see, the posterior. So I'm matching my production data given a tolerance that I have specified. So I still capture the uncertainty, an uncertainty on this posterior. And what I want to do is that I want to understand what has been changed, how my models have been updated in order to match with this production data. What is the impact of the calibration? So what we can do is that we can look at the parameters one by one. For example, the oil-water contact. What you see here is that the initial, so the green distribution here, it's the initial uncertainty. It's the prior uncertainty of the oil-water contact. That was quite large. Okay, we had an uncertainty of 200 meters between 2,100 and 2,300. After doing the assimilation of the production data, what we see is that we now have a new uncertainty distribution, which is now much more it has been totally shrinked. Okay, so we are now and we have now changed the shape also. So we know that we have a high probability to have an oil-water contact that is around this value. But so it's the estimate, and we still have an uncertainty, a standard deviation associated to this value. But in the overall, the uncertainty related to the oil-water contact has been totally reduced by calibrating with data from the field. So that's something that we can do by parameters one by one, but we have nice analysis tools to be a little bit more efficient. So I wanted to show you this tool, which is quite new and I like a lot. So all those lines here, they represent a run. So each line represents a model of an ensemble, a run. And then what you have here, all those blah, 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 they are the modifiers, are the parameters that are attached with uncertainty. So this first one, for example, is the proportion of channel. Here you have the uncertainty on the oil-water contact, A and B parameters for the J function for the water saturation, top and base, so that's the uncertainty on the location in space of those top and base of the reservoir. And all of that, it's also the uncertainty related to the location of the fault in space, and KVKH. And then we have this last parameter here, the Q, which is the quality, which is also linked to the color palette. And I'm using this parameter to filter my run, because the quality, actually, the lowest quality you have, the closest your results are from your production data. So the lowest quality, the more calibrated your models are. And I'm using that to filter my runs, and I will then display the distribution of those different modifiers. So what is interesting is that now I can see that I can retrieve this result I was looking at for the oil-water contact. So how this initial uncertainty have been shrunk toward some really specific values. I can also look at, and like that, I can look at all the parameters all at the same time. So I can see that, for example, the channel, the proportional channel, it's something that has to be, in average, increased in order to match with my production data. However, you can see that there are parameters such as the uncertainty on this fault F3. So here it's really the location of the fault in space that has absolutely no impact. However, this parameter F5 has actually, when we are going to calibrate with prediction data, we see that there are some positions that are just impossible. So we reduce the uncertainty for this specific fault. So here, I'm analyzing my run all at the same time using the, let's say, the workflow orchestrator application. And there are a lot of other tools. However, there are also tools, you can also do some analysis, which is each application that are used by each scientist. So I'm going to move directly here, but the idea is that each collaborators, they can retrieve results within their own application that are used to, they are used to use, okay? And analyze the difference between the prior and posterior, do some multi-realization statistics in order to really extract insights and understand the reservoir. So for example, for a geophysicist, if velocity modeling is a process that is integrated in the loop, he will understand probably how his velocity model must be modified, if it has to be modified in order to match with production data. So we'll know if it has velocity uncertainty, it will reduce the uncertainty on this velocity model. So it will have an impact on the location of the structure of the reservoir. So here it's another example of another data set where we had an initial map for the top reservoir that was located at some point. And after calibrated with production data, we have a new map. And when we look at the global shift, what we see is that actually the top reservoir have been shifted, is now higher in order to and that's what is the true location of this reservoir in order to respect the data from the field. For the petrophysicist also, if you use different types of processes, if they are integrated in the loop, you will learn how, what's the calibration, how assimilating production data will impact your uncertainty. So here we have an example of J function against water saturation plot. What is interesting is that in this case, we have used 4D seismic, and by adding 4D seismic, it has really drastically reduced the uncertainty on the J function parameters. So that's, if you want to see that as log in your log application, that's also something you can do. So what you have here in gray, it's the posterior uncertainty on the water saturation log. What you have in colors, it is the different iterative refinement runs, and the final one is the red one. So you can compare the prior versus posterior uncertainty on water saturation. Same for the geomodeler. So uncertainty on structure are extremely important. Here we are integrating uncertainty on fault and horizons. You see all of that at the same time. So in gray, again, you have the prior uncertainty on the structure, and you see that it's 0 along the well markers, and it's increased close to the faults, and we have an uncertainty along the fault. However, after calibrating with production data, there are some faults whose uncertainty are not really changed. There are no major modification, but there are some faults where the uncertainty is reduced, such as this one, the red one here, or it's shifted. You have a new distribution in space, like this light blue one. So, and of course, the reservoir engineers is also going to learn. So if he has, if he's modeling some specific the behavior, the characteristic of the fluids, that's also things where you could improve your understanding and reduce uncertainties in this domain. So once you have understood and validated the ensemble, and you have got this knowledge from the field, well, you feel confident in using those results to do reserve booking. Then you can do some forecasts, you can compare different scenarios, you can test them, you can compare them using those delta ensembles. And also, of course, within this tool that I'm showing you, Tempest, if you want, you can also optimize them afterward. Always taking into account the uncertainty, and always providing a measure of the estimate and standard deviation, so you have probabilistic a robust quantification of risk associated to all those measures. Well, and what is, so automation is great for creating this integration across discipline and having a common framework so that everybody can understand each other and discuss. Another benefit of this approach is that each time you need to update your model with new data, it's going to be extremely much more easier, at least depending on the kind of modification you need to do. And what we see is that people, they usually build one big loop workflow. So they take a lot of time to do this study and integrate all the different components. But then this is something that is going to stay and evolve all along the field life. So each time you have new data, you're going to be able to propagate those modifications much more easier, much more faster than with a traditional approach across disciplines. And then you will be able to, and so you have a model that will be almost always ready to deliver new data, new insights, and each time you need to take decisions regarding the field. And that's behavior, this characteristic, that's what we call evergreen. So big loop models are evergreen. Okay. So, but well, that's a consequence. But in the overall, when we talk with the persons, the asset teams that are using this approach, what they tell us is that first of all, the first value of this workflow is really being able to reduce the risk and be able to identify the most optimal field development, field production scenario in order to reduce cost and increase production. That's really the first thing. And the second real important thing is the fact that it's being able to integrate information and having this common workflow to discuss and talk, and it enhances collaboration, and all the different collaborators are going to better understand, have a better overall understanding of the reservoir. And that's true all along the field life. And that's really the value of this workflow. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. So I think that we have, I've covered all I wanted to show you. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Camille. It was a great presentation. So actually we have some questions for you already.
Okay.
First one from Martin. Hello Camille, once the feedback loop is done, is Big Loop able to modify the original 3D model, for example, with the preferred parameter values, or does the GeoModeler need to do it manually?
To modify with what parameters, sorry?
To modify the original 3D model.
Well, everything is modified fully automatically from A to Z. So you don't need to, the idea is really to avoid having to do any manual tasks.
So actually, can the GeoModeler modify the preferred parameters and it's automatic, or he has to enter everything manually?
No, everything is automatic.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. So question from Gis. If I understand correctly, you are correcting the distribution by the production data. Are you not biasing the result when you are squeezing the uncertainties to match the production data? More wells or wells at different locations would change the scaling of your uncertainties.
Yeah, that's true that it's that's true that there is something that if you depending on the methods, so that's really something coming from the ACT history match methods. So we have two different types of algorithm to do this history match. The ensemble smoother, indeed, if you have some wells, you will see that you have some. It may happen that you have some effect of what we call the bull eyes effect. Okay, so at certain areas where you have wells, you will see the impact of the wells on the modification of the parameters. However, the idea is to be able to, that also happens if you, let's say, if you modify parameters in a not geologic consistent way, I would say. The idea is that so we have the other application, the other algorithm first, the proxy base that has been optimized to minimize those kind of effects. And the idea is that if you have, let's say you need to increase your porosity in order to match with production data at some well. Well, the idea is that it's not only the porosity that is going to be updated at this location, it's the Facies model that is going to be modeled. In the Facies model, you're going to account, we have some tools to account for stochasticity, so we account for the stochasticity noise, and we're going to, by modifying directly the geologic parameter in ensuring that all those modifications you need to do in the model in order to match your production respects as much as possible all geologic, the geologic consistency of the processes that leaded to having a higher, this value of porosity here. That's how we are going to minimize as much as possible those bias effects indeed.
Okay. Next question from Pedram. Does Big Loop make chain between any software which has scripting capability or only specific software applications?
So it works with the idea is that any application that can work in batch and from a command line, it can be used with Big Loop. Now the idea is that it's an application. So you have seen, I'm going to generate thousands, hundreds, and in the end, I end up with really a lot of runs. We have customers that work with this application. They do thousands of runs all the time. So you need to use clusters. So your application, they also need to respect the requirements to work on clusters. So so that's the second thing. After, if it has to be able to work fully automatically from a command line and in batch. And if this is respected, yes, it has no limit. After, we just have to, what we do is that we use an XML file that will run the application, and we just need to specify to correctly set up this file, and you can add as many components as you want within the application, within the workflow orchestrator, and create a sequence. And yeah, that's great.
Okay. From Ali, increase production up to 60%. Isn't that exaggerated? Is it the model output or it has been confirmed by actual production?
So this number, it's not coming from me. It's it's an average that has been estimated from the different feedback that we have from customers. I can't tell you much more than that, but it's not coming from me. That's the numbers we have from marketing department.
Okay. From Martin, the workflow orchestrator seems very similar to Google's orchestrator, Kubernetes. Are you using it?
I'm sorry, I don't know Kubernetes. So I don't know, maybe. But
okay.
I will check on internet.
Okay. From Ayan, thank you for the presentation. What method is used to minimize and optimize the number of sample runs to map uncertainties?
So in this case, I was using the proxy-based approach. So basically, we use a response surface. We're going to. I can send you some paper. I can give you some reference of papers if you want more detail on the method. But the idea is that you're going to look at the variables one by all together at the same time and create a surface response, and then there are some processes to refine the surface response, really just in the areas where you need that are close to your in the area of interest where you have the value that you want to match. But it would be better. I can send you some reference for that. It would be better explained than by me.
Okay, thank you. So from Jean-Luc, Hi Camille, very nice presentation. From your experience, how many loops do you have to run to optimize the history matching? And what is the gain in time running the project as you're considering the ensemble of models? Are you rejecting some unrealistic models after the first loop?
Well, the number of runs that we have, to do, it depends of the number of modifiers. If I, sorry, in order to here with 50 modifiers, I needed around 200 scoping runs first. So the number of scoping runs, that's really that's where you screen through the uncertainty space. So that's the moment where you're really investigating and well, computing this surface response. So that here, that's where you need to do the more run. And then generally, once you have this number of scoping runs, this is something that can really change a lot depending on your project. And then after, usually for the refinement, we do 20 refinements 5 times or 4 or 5 times, and then we've got history match. So that's if the initial scoping runs, if the initial the post prior uncertainty makes sense, and that if we don't need to go back and change the parameters. So that's for answering your first questions. After regarding the rejection of some interesting models, well, actually, we cannot really reject any specific realization, because if we reject one realization, we have to reject the whole ensemble. So if we have to reject one model, we need to come back on the parameters and ensure that this kind of models cannot be generated within the parameters that I've used for the workflow.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Anna Maria. Thanks for the presentation, Camille. Really interesting how the input workflow works. We start to load the SegWI and creating the horizon and the model and dynamic model and do the simulation and so on. When you mention is automatic, in which part of the workflow is automatic?
So in this case, well, we don't do automated fully. I mean, I don't know any solution that will do fully automated interpretation. So right now, the workflow begins with loading interpretation data already generated. Okay, so I'm loading sticks, I'm loading picks, and then I have what is automated is all the workflow that is going to clean those data, generate the fault and horizon surfaces. Then we do a velocity model. Here in this case, it's a layer-based velocity models. And then we do the time-lapse conversion. We convert our model in the depth domain. So interpretation is not automated. It's just the construction of the structure. What is automated? It's when you, so yeah, interpretation is not automated. What is automated is all the processes that can be automated, such as creating a structural framework and a grid and doing petrophysical modeling. Also calculating petrophysical models. That's something that can be automated. I mentioned the use of 4D seismic. In this case, when we use 4D seismic, it's actually we use 4D seismic to do from the 4D seismic, we calculate the location of the fluids at specific time, and so and once we have the fluid model by inverting the 4D seismic, we use that to calibrate the dynamic model. So yeah, So here, in what I have done, the larger, for the moment, for my experience, the largest scope of the workflow that we have done, it's from petrophysics to structural modeling, geomodeling, static and dynamic modeling, and then also what is really important and that we don't always realize is also being able to integrate all what's happened between the well and the tank, all those network constraints, and the surface constraint, the choke that are going to impact actually because it's going to impact the real production that you can have, and so that's also something that can be integrated in the workflow.
Okay. Next question from Wilfried. So can you confirm that we do all the job once base case and then the workflow can be replayed by the orchestrator sampling in the uncertainty envelope?
Yes, Wilfried.
Okay. So another question, can we use this workflow in any field, like geothermal fields, and is it applicable for any geological environment?
So honestly, geothermal field, I've never seen that, but I mean, it works with any geologic environment. After, the idea is you need to be able to plug the right pieces of software to do what you want. So if you have a geothermal simulator that works, that can be, and I guess yes, because all traditional simulators can be implemented in this workflow. If it can be implemented, if it respects the requirements, well, yes, why not doing that for geothermal too? But right now, this workflow has been mainly used for, only used for my knowledge for E&P application, oil and gas application in Middle East and mostly in the North Sea. And yes, and we also have case studies in Middle East, in subsalt fields in Brazil. So yes, we are dealing with a lot of different types of environments. Again, dealing with the types of geologic environments depends on what the geoscientists input in the workflow. So can be any kind of environment.
Okay, thank you. Then question from Martin. Thank you for the nice presentation. Can the uncertainty analysis be played or an incomplete workflow, for instance, to test the uncertainty on the STOIP without the production data?
Yes, so that's when you do that, that's what we call the small loops. So indeed, what is interesting is that you have the big loop, but you can always take some pieces of the workflow and run only some pieces of the workflow. You can deactivate some components to do only to only run some of the parts, and that's interesting because that's also something that can allow you to test parameters at a smaller scale. On a smaller loop to try to understand more closely some interdependencies between parameters. And then once you have that, you can always come back and reconnect everything within the big loop that ensure the global consistency of your models. Well,
okay.
Thank you very much for
Camille.
all your questions.
Yeah, so we just close the Q&A. If you have like any more question, you can just send an email to the EIG or to Camille directly. So yeah, I think this lunch and learn is finished. And thank you very much, Camille, for your presentation and the answer of the questions.
Yeah, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you. It was very great. Thank you very much.